Hi everyone. We are live here in the Potrero stage in San Francisco. My name is Naila Harper-Melville. I use she, her pronouns. And I am so grateful to be here with these incredible playwrights, the Fabulous Five. Well, not exactly, right, but still fabulous, very fabulous. So we have Jaisey Bates over here, Hamashima, Kaela Mae-Shing Garvin, Johnny G. Lloyd, and Miyoko Conley. I will let them actually introduce themselves later. I'm the Community Relationships Manager here at Playwrights Foundation, and just so excited to sort of speak more on, talk to you more about your work and your plays and the process that you've been through in this festival. We are on our second day of the Bay Area Playwrights Festival. We have already seen two incredible readings. Last night we saw Johnny's play, The Problem with Magic Is, and then just this morning we saw Kaela's incredible piece, Tiger Beat, which had music as well. So very excited for the plays to come this weekend and also next weekend, and excited to get sort of more into these questions. Let's see. Other housekeeping things, I think? Yes. I just wanted to acknowledge that we are on the unceded land of the Ramaytush-speaking Ohlone people, who have been the traditional and are also still stewarding these lands, and so we just want to honor them in this moment. And you can also find out what native land you are also, currently residing on and occupying yourself as well. So just want to take a moment to do that, and also just get started. So, hi, could you all introduce yourselves? I've been sort of inspired, Kaela, by your show, because the Girls Next Door, which is this amazing pop girl group, has this awesome song, Girls Next Door, and it is such an earworm in the best of ways. And so I'm curious if each one of you could say a line from either your play or another one of the playwrights' plays that is really sticking with you. What's your earworm currently? So introduce yourselves, and what's your earworm? Whoever wants to start. I might need a minute. I might need a minute to think about that.
Hi, I'm Jaisey Bates. And from Tiger Beat, my earworm is singular multiplicity. And it is such an earworm that it is going to be in my play as well.
Yeah. I'll go next. I'm Kaela Mae-Shing Garvin, and I feel like there are so many lines from all of the plays that we've seen that are really sticking with me, and I'm also so excited to see the endings of Sam and Miyoko's plays, because I feel like there's bound to be an earworm in there as well. But I'm thinking about Johnny's incredible reading, which we saw last night, and I'm thinking about the moment in which Jabari opens one eye and is like, hey, and speaks across time. That's sticking in my head for sure.
I'll go. Why not? Hi, I'm Johnny G. Lloyd, he, him pronouns, and my earworm is like an ear character, and an ear moment maybe, which is that in Sam's play there's a great moment where the cactus realizes that they have legs and pulls their legs out of the ground, and it's just so fun and so cool. So that's my moment.
Hi, my name is Sam Hamashima. I use any pronouns. They, them is where I like my middle ground. For my earworm, from Kaela's piece today, it was about sort of the smell of a home. And at the end, there was this one line where you say in the play, at the end it just smelled like paperwork. And that to me really resonated. And yeah, that was just beautiful description, beautiful image.
My name is Miyoko Conley. I use she, her pronouns, and my earworm, it's going to be quite literal, is Kaela's song, Girls Next Door, which I think I've been literally waking up hearing for the past week in my head, so yeah.
Same. I was literally singing it, and then that's what made me think of the question. much for that. I forgot to say my earworm actually is from your play, Johnny. What is it? Extreme melting of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of time, actually, each of your plays really delve into different understandings and concepts around time. And so I'm curious, and not everyone has to answer all of these questions, but I'm curious, how, what are some of those different understandings of time? I know, Miyoko, for you, like the different robots have different understandings of time, and Jaisey, in your play, there's like this interweaving of time, and as I said, Johnny, you're this person who's embodying a melting of time. So I'm just curious, like, what were you thinking about time, and what questions were you asking around that?
Well, hi. Hey there, audience. So for me, like, approaching like time is like one, I feel like it's really intimidating to mess with, but it's also really freeing to mess with, because once you realize that it's just a human construct and you can play with it, then like you can use it to your advantage in your scripts or in your work. Like for me, like I see time in my play as sort of this like upward spiral that is like also being like pulled down by gravity. So it's also like, it's like a wet paint spiral, and then it's like feeding into each other, because like that's what intergenerational trauma does. Like it has no just one time, it just like goes around a racquetball court, but I think like messing with time is like can be like very brave, but like it also can be very foolish. So you gotta just keep asking I have to ask myself questions like as I'm writing, is like, does this mess up like my other time? Like
Right.
over and over again I have to ask myself that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say in my play, because there are a lot of robot characters and it's in the future, I was thinking to myself, like, the robots are not going to experience time the same way that we experience time, in the same way we've constructed it, the same units of measurement. So I was really trying to think about that, and yet also be just a little careful, because I only have my understanding of time, right? So I was trying to play with it, but also not maybe project too much onto the characters, and just try to figure out what time really means to them.
Yeah. And Miyoko, you're a games writer as well, right? So how does that impact how you're looking at world building or time?
Yeah, I mean, I think with games writing, a lot of it is about thinking about the player interacting with the game itself, and therefore certain things, like when you write a play or a script, it's that you're thinking of the timing a lot of the dialogue and the way the timing is going to flow in the play. But when you have a game, the player is making that time a lot of the time go, right? And of course there's timing and flow in games as well. But I do think that has kind of helped me approach just thinking of the different ways that I've seen time happen in other media, particularly interactive media within my play.
That's so interesting. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always been like super fascinated by playing with time. I think that time is maybe the first thing that I realized was actually like it was a construct that was subjective in a way. Like we don't all experience like the same. And just thinking about like I associate time a lot with memory, like both like long-term memory, like memory of like humanity over the course of centuries, but also like personal memory, like what are the important things? Because I think that time is the way that we've constructed time is such that it's easier to look backwards in time than it is to look forward. And so when you remember that, and so that was kind of like the first thing that like when I was like little, I was like, oh, like this is actually like kind of, I'm not experiencing this the same way that like my parents are experiencing this. And then like I like went down like a whole like science kick where it's like light years and like, like I exist like, like 5 years ago, like really far in space. Like that's weird. Or like I'm watching like that star explode and actually that happened like, like 100 million years ago. Like it gets kind of like interesting in terms of like what exists where. And like, I think that in terms of what theater can do, I think that one of the exciting things that theater can do is it can give, you can take subjectivity in a way and kind of like show your experience of that subjectivity to like a wider audience, and nobody will encounter it the same way. And I think that what's so exciting about playing with time in particular is that different people will take different things from that playing of time, because we aren't all experiencing the same pieces at the same moment. And so like I think that it's always like really rich to just dig in and do something crazy with time, because you know it'll always give some sort of like additional layer of like, oh, like what is my reality? Like it always makes me question that.
Yeah. And Jaisey, you actually have characters who play time.
And different characters play time at different times. And I think it's all about Kaela's idea of singular multiplicity. I'm just fascinated by the conviction that, well, I believe all times exist in every instant. And I believe that words carry time, past, present, and future. That's why, well, in my understanding, that's why it's such magic when we go into a theater and we see words that are written in the past, but we experience it in the present tense. And so that also means that all of the blood memories, you know, of everyone who's gone before us are alive and speaking in every present moment that we experience. And I think it just opens, for me, it opens a sense of not being solitaire and alone and divorced, but as one little element within a living narrative that is always constellating and always changing and speaking present, past, and future. If that makes any sense.
Totally. Yeah. Everything is everything. Yeah, for sure. And it's you know, I'm also co-directing Jaisey's piece. So it's funny, we actually talked about this in rehearsal, and this whole conversation is reminding me of this idea of cyclic time, and of how everything is happening at once, and some things are so ancient that they're actually sort of in the future, and then some things are so far in the future that they actually become ancient, or they feel ancient. And I think I'm hearing just a lot of that type of cyclic motion around time from all of you, so I'm really excited about how that plays out in your work. Well, I'm curious to talk about the plays, right? So what made you write these works, right? Like, what was the impetus behind telling this particular story? I know that many of you started writing these plays before the pandemic and then continued through the pandemic and through this year. And I'm curious about how that impacted the play or how it changed it.
Well, like in Supposed Home, like if I'm gonna like pick one thing that's like the football every character's throwing is probably Japanese American concentration camps. And I started writing this as sort of a way to kind of visualize this trauma, this intergenerational story, and how everyone has a different like technique on throwing it or a different spin on it, right? And so it can sort of transcend time, and that's why you have all these different sort of situations happening, right? You were in the 1940s, but you're also in the 2000s, and then you're also in a space where time just like doesn't exist, you know? But so like for me, like I was just really excited to sort of investigate and put like sort of a flashlight on this experience and how it is like never just like something in the past. Like this is still impacting my life, like now, you know?
I started writing Tiger Beat for specifically to be a thesis project for my MFA. And so I started coming at it with that lens of like, what does the university have to offer, and what can I, what resources can I use here that I'm maybe not going to get in the outside world. And so it actually brought me first to thinking about costumes, because I love costumes, if you can't tell. But I started thinking about, okay, so what could we feasibly do with costumes that would be fun for me and fun for the other MFA designers and fun for like the team to work on. And I also started thinking about like the things that I love in life, which are all like pop music. And so that sort of really clearly like brought me to the setting of the play, which is 2003 pop music. I was also thinking about sort of my experiences within like theater, but also my experiences like as a human in the world, as someone who's mixed, as someone who's like trying to navigate rooms that are often predominantly white, and like what how all those things came together ended up being the play Tiger Beat. And I think the pandemic was a really interesting wrench in the stew, just in that it was the last thing I did before the pandemic. We closed the show. I'm really grateful for the experience, but we closed the show, and then within like a week the nation had sort of shut down. So I was very lucky, like the last thing I got to do before the pandemic was like see my work, and then I had like a full year to ruminate on it, and I didn't touch the play. And then I am really grateful to have this experience where I feel like the world really has changed, and in ways that impacts the play a lot, but at the same time I feel like what I have to say remains the same. It's just like how do I articulate it when the world around me has changed.
Yeah, I think because I also wrote basically all of the main chunks of text for A Problem with Magic, like kind of right before the pandemic began. So like looking like probably like October through like March basically, and then I like did like a massive revision like at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I think what was interesting about doing that was that I think that at that particular moment we were in a place of like, theater doesn't exist, which is actually, I think, sometimes a very freeing place to be. Like, it can actually be very freeing to be like, okay, so like, I have like these rules, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, the rules don't matter. And it kind of like opens you up. And I had been trying to write a play that was similar to Problem with Magic for years and years and years, and I could not get it right at all. And like every time I would like be like, oh, like, you know, like they're in a magic shop, and then like someone comes in and changes the magic shop, and I was like, it's not there. And I think that what like opened it up for me was being like, oh, like the rules don't matter. Like the rules about this play that's like ostensibly about gentrification, like none of those rules actually serve me in any instance. Like I should just like make a thing that like goes like really far in any given direction. And I think that like in that particular moment, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when it was like, is anyone going to be in person for who knows how long? And I think that like a lot of questions, especially as like early career artists, all of those words are limiting, early career, emerging, etc. But in the space that is often occupied by whatever word you want to have be there, I think that like there were also a lot of questions about like when will like my work be able to be on a stage even after this, because like how many promises are being kept, how many things are happening that like, you know, like that must happen before we can really respond to this moment. And I think that kind of allowing myself to be like, well, then none of that matters, allowed me to kind of like really be fearless in putting what I felt like putting on, like in the text. And that was a silver lining, I guess, to all of the very terrible stuff that was happening at that time.
Yeah, so I started writing Human Museum, I guess, at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, so it was pre any lockdowns or things like that. And I think there wasn't like one impetus at the time. It was just I was kind of thinking a lot about by the way, in my play, the human species is extinct, and there are just robots left. So I was thinking a lot about that topic of like human extinction, and I don't really exactly know why. I was also trying to think a lot about like, I have all of these stories from like my family that I hold on to, and I'm going to, in theory, pass them along. And like when we think about when we write and we're writing these stories, who carries them on? And I was thinking like, what happens to that, because it's kind of intangible after we're all like, after humans are all dead, right? What could happen then? So I did write a full draft of it right before sort of a lot of lockdowns happened, and then when that happened for me, I was still revising it and working on it, and very luckily got to hear some actors read it online. And then it just sort of felt like a lot of people were talking about that type of topic. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think that kind of in a way helped, and in a way I just shut it out, you know, so in a way I was listening, and in a way I was like trying to just stay within what I was thinking about. But yeah, so that's how that came about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure, I started writing real-time remix, I think about a week and a half to 2 weeks before we came up here. So this has been an extraordinary adventure, and in the most freeing and exhausting way, because real-time remix is pulling together selections from things that I've written over time, but curating it for this particular journey and our particular ensemble, and it's a dialogue of what has been really fascinating for me for years, which is trying to negotiate with Shakespeare, trying to negotiate with the weight of white words in theater, in our lives, and how to make space and room for othered words to be heard, to have agency. In my particular universe of being, words are very much alive and have their own lives apart from us. So this has been a very stone soup kind of thing. Like, I'm not kidding when I'm like, Kaela, I love that I'm putting that. You know, you all are going to see like elements from your plays and from conversations in the kitchen in the house, you know. Because I think it just opens everything up to our shared humanity. You know, that's the hope, that's the joy, and it's been an incredible journey. And I can't wait to share the work with you all very specifically, and anybody else who happens to mind, as a living, breathing dialogue. So thank you.
Wow, thank you all so much for just speaking to your journeys with your work. It's so inspiring to hear. I would love to actually bring something in that, Miyoko, you talked a little bit about, which was legacy, and what do we leave behind, what is left behind for us, many of your works really delve into questions around legacy, and so I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you're dealing with legacy or in your work, and you know, what does that have to do also with your own personal understandings of what legacy means? It's not an easy question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, so we're about to go to the dark places. I feel like when I was like a kid, and I think especially like as I was like becoming aware of my queerness and like also just like my dad's side of the family is very large. My mom's side of the family is very, very small. And so I became kind of aware relatively at a very young age that like I would maybe be like kind of the last generation of like a part of my family, like that it might not continue past me. And I think that that has informed like a lot of how I like behave in the world generally, actually. But I think especially in regards to what I think legacy is, because I think that like actually like, you know, I mean, I guess there's a version where it's like it is something to like pass on to a very specific person, but also maybe it's something to pass on to like, you know, like the world at large. And it's not necessarily about like me passing down like, you know, like my chromosomes through like generations, which I do think is like a version of legacy that people like kind of can glom onto. But I think for me, it's more about like, okay, well, you know, how am I sharing like what I believe to be true and passing that on? And like, I mean, like not to get too like out there, but I do think that like, you know, like part of what is joy about being a writer is that like, you know, like not only my legacy, but the legacy of my parents, the legacy of my grandparents, the legacy of like all of these people like exists within like even something that's very bad that I've written. Like, and like if it's like any better, then that's like amazing and I've done them justice, you know? But like I think that there's a power in that and a power in like being like, okay, like I am myself, but also like there are like all of these people behind me that like, you know, are informing what I'm doing, like no matter what my connection to them may be, that I think makes like my experience of writing like very special. And I try to like carry some element of that, even if it's like, and like also like acknowledging that like just because they are my ancestors, like it's not necessarily like look at all these like, you know, like great people who are like perfect, like they're human, they were human and like they were here and they are still here like with us, but like human beings, you know. And like I think that that gives like a responsibility to like complication and like a responsibility to like trying to unearth that humanity that like I feel like being a writer allows you to do in a way that's like very exciting. I don't know if I talked about my play, but my play has legacy too.
Watch it.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel like all of our works are really kind of literally dealing with legacy. Like in your play, Johnny, you're talking about like both like emotional legacy, but also like literal legacy, wills, deeds, stuff like that. I think in Miyoko's play too, like that's also a very literal version of legacy, like what's left behind from the humans. I'm remembering a specific part of your play too that's like about all the USB cables, like
Plastic bottles.
Are we more than our trash? You know? No. But yeah, no, I think and like I'm just so I think. It's such a like I'm just gonna use this word a lot, but like it's a very rich question because I feel like each of us approaches it differently and interprets legacy slightly differently, but it's all sort of, at least to me in your work, what I see is sort of like what you know, what exists beyond our like ephemeral state, our like transient passing through this plane state, and I think that's really exciting. Yeah.
Kaela, can you speak to Tiger Beat and what legacy means to you?
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm really thinking about in my version of rewrites here is like specifically around like ancestral legacy, right? Like what do we inherit from the people who came before us, whether they are our biological family tree or whether they're our artistic family tree? Like what do we inherit from the people who came before us, particularly those who are at varying degrees of related to us, right? Like are they people that, you know, others are going to put us in the same sentence with, or are they people that like we find inspiration in? And I think that's like an interesting thing because I do feel like either way it's a relation, right? And I think too, I'm also like sort of in a more pointed way now looking at the legacy of like Americana and how does American imperialism interact with American pop culture? How does like our country's militarism interact with our day-to-day lives, and what's that sort of relationship? And then my play set in the year 2003, so like then, you know, going on 20 years later, what remains from that moment in time, and like how do I want to reinterpret that as a writer?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to, we can also move on.
Oh, I'm like afraid of death, so like legacy is like really hard for me to like think about. I mean, for me, like legacy's in my play, like it is very much in the play, and don't laughing
No,
at me.
I just feel like actually in your play though, like legacy is not tied to death in a way that I think it's really interesting that you led with. I'm afraid of death because in your play I feel like legacy somehow divorces itself from death, which is like my most common interpretation is like legacy and death.
Yeah, well, I think about like legacy as like, is that something I can make or is that something someone will put on me? Like, you know, will my grandchildren, when they're Googling what happened to me, like, is that a legacy they're gonna make of me? You know what I mean? As opposed to like what I passed to them. You know, how much of like legacy is like a choice that you leave? Because like there will come a time where like you are dead and you cannot influence what your legacy is, right?
Yeah. It's so interesting, yeah, because I feel like Sam, in your play, it really is, does the grandmother have the choice to decide what her legacy is to her grandson, and how does that interact with intergenerational trauma, and what, you know, she wants to pass down, if she wants to pass that down, or if she has a choice, right?
Google, like, you know.
Yeah.
I think in the remix, there's a couple different kinds of legacy going on. There's the legacy of what has been written on this land and what has been written on the bodies and stories of all of those who have not been granted full voice on this land. The legacy that I, as omniscient author or whatever, am trying to gift the characters with raising as like a ritual, you know, raising the sky of this weight so that their own stories have space, so that the page and the words literally hold space for the stories of the actors who are bringing the words through their bodies, but also the people who might be listening and receiving it this is the goal, in a non-alienating to global minority viewers kind of way, because the goal is just, you know, everybody getting to be able to communicate and share their stories and survive and thrive and just be in unity and write a beautiful new American story. And yeah, okay, so that's a lot of hope, but that's my my hope. And then the other thing that is kind of curious is that for me, I've never been produced, so, and especially this work, this journey itself is the legacy of these words. And it's like gifting, hopefully, just by releasing the words into the air or the Zoom room or whatever, even if they are never voiced again or published or anything like that, they'll have a silent, beautiful, radiant legacy, moving like water under the skin of silence, of othered words, and helping in their small way to hold space for them. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here with my questions, and you know, we just saw two incredible readings I spoke about Tiger Beat and The Problem with Magic Is, and both of them sort of have these elements of surprise in them. I don't want you to feel like you have to give anything away, but I feel like there are elements of surprise in really each one of your incredible new works. And so I'm curious, what does that do? Why do you use it? And also, I think it does something to the relationship between the play and the audience. And so, like, what is that mechanism for you in your writing?
Surprise, surprise. I like, please welcome to the stage, surprise. No, I love using surprise in work. Like, so like I'm doing mostly starting like anime theater, so it's like very inspired by cartoon and manga. And there's like surprises in anime like all the time. Like it's a device they use to get you back in the next week for next week's episode. And, I mean, is that something I do to make people, like, stay interested in my work for an hour and a half? Perhaps. Like, surprise can be used as a tool to keep attention, right? Other than that, like, I love it because I love stretching the limitations of a world I build, and surprise can really do that for someone and make them really see the world for what it is, because they see sort of, like the end of the, like if they're touching the elephant, you know what I mean? Like there comes a point where they're no longer touching the elephant. Do you know what I'm talking? I'm talking about that metaphor of like everyone touches
Yeah,
like
different
the
part of
blind
the
mice.
elephant.
Yeah.
Blind
Yeah.
mice,
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was actually though just thinking about this, like, I guess for the past week I was thinking, yeah, there's a moment in all of our plays where everything in the very best of ways kind of falls apart or goes completely sideways. And I think just for me in Human Museum in particular, I was playing a lot with sort of apocalypse genre fiction, so it's a lot of apocalypse movies, references, and things like that, and thinking about how those pieces of media, they project our thoughts about what's going to happen, or perhaps hopes or fears about what's going to happen to us in an apocalyptic scenario. And so for me, just the surprise element is a way to maybe break away from the expectations that a lot of those media set up, and to also then hopefully make you think about what your expectations are for the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like the shortest answers that I find that I end up writing, like a lot of plays with surprise, a lot of horror, actually, weirdly, because I am extraordinarily skittish, easily terrified, like very anxious, and like that just like permeates everything that I do. Like it's like even like if I'm like, oh, it's just like kind of like cute and nice, like people are like, why did you stress me out so much? So like I can't help some of that. But I also think that like one of the things that I get really excited about in terms of theater that I think I feel like I've seen more and more in the last several years, I certainly see in like all of these plays, is a willingness to like challenge perspective and like challenge whose perspective the story is being told from. And I think that for me, like when I'm using surprise, I'm often trying to like get at like what is the story that you thought this was supposed to be? Because like, and why did you think it was supposed to be that? And I think that like by like providing that shock, you can kind of like cause someone to recontextualize like what they think that they've seen, and like I've always find that like very necessary and very exciting.
Yeah, and it's so connected to what you're saying about time too, around how time is actually such a subjective way that we're thinking, an individual way of thinking, and by changing the time or changing the way that we understand time in a play, that also makes us rethink and challenge our own ways of how we're perceiving the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, also it's like lizard brain. Like, it's like we as humans like love getting the rug pulled out from under us. Like, we like that vicarious thing that happens where it's like why people, not me, I can't watch horror movies, but like it's why people watch horror movies. It's like why people like watch things that are suspenseful. Like, it's actually for like release. And like, I think that if you can provide that release while also like intellectually like challenging someone, or maybe not even intellectually, just generally challenging someone. I'm an intellectual. I think that like that can like it's like you're both like providing satisfaction and also like providing questions and like an opportunity for questioning, and I think that's like such an exciting intersection.
That makes me think, you know, when you have an element of surprise, is it always satisfying? Does it need to be?
I think it's often satisfying for me because it subverts expectation, right? Like that's the thing about a surprise is you're not expecting it. But I think that like that feeling to me personally, I love it, and I think like all of the moments of surprise in your work are the moments when I really like lean in. So I think at least for me, it's often, if not always, satisfying. But I don't like surprises in my personal life. So.
I think surprises can also help an audience feel like it's whatever the subject material they're discussing is either present or is quote unquote relevant. Like I hate that question of like, why is what you do relevant? And I'm like, can you read a newspaper? Like look around, you know? But like for me, it's like, you know, history is surprising. Like, and if you are dramatizing or discussing history, you should make it surprising, because there's a lot that happens that like you look at and you're like, oh, that's not right, or you know, it's like good didn't win. You know what I mean? And like what happens when like history doesn't offer that happy ending, right? Because like we don't get one, right? And so allowing people to see like this anime landscape and be surprised at sort of the ending is exciting for me, because I think it leads to discovery.
Yeah. And for everyone tuning in, if you want to see all these amazing surprises, you're just going to have to listen to the readings. So yeah, I want to sort of have our last question here, and it's around, you know, we have this sort of really a unique and very new experience of like all being together in space, and most of you are actually in the same house together, in the sort of retreat house that I am calling the Real World House Playwrights Edition. It'll catch on, I'm sure. And so I am really curious about what is it like to sort of write in community? How has that impacted your pieces and your process in this journey?
I mean, for me, one of my first new editions, I read it and I like put it into the script, and then I immediately took it out later because I was like, oh my god, this is literally Jaisey. I wrote in a way that was like very Jaisey, and I was like, oh my god, wait, stop, like stay in your lane, you know? But like, it's really awesome to be in community with other writers that like understand that like you might just be like, oh, I need to go into that corner and like tap on my laptop and that'll be great. And like they know that you're still in the room and you're still present. You're just doing this as well, you know? I was in the car this morning and like had a very like moment of just like, wow, it's amazing that like we all open up a word processor and we all tap, tap, tap. And like without that, we would never know each other, probably, you know? So it's so much fun being around other writers. Like I miss it. Like when I'm not with other writers, like I do miss it. I find that there is an absence.
And feel free to spill the tea too. You know, if there's any drama.
Well, if you want to get into drama, no. I think it's also worth saying that the four of us. Miyoko's not in the house with us because Miyoko's local, but the four of us are in the house with Heather Nowinski, who's the literary manager, and is truly like a light and a love. And I think that like what I've been able to kind of take away from the experience of like being with everyone is not even necessarily just like the writing process, but like I think that like, you know, the last year and a half especially has been like very isolating for lots of people for lots of different reasons. And I think that like, you know, a part of the playwriting experience often is that like you are, especially, and I think this is becoming more and more true, is that you are often actually thrown into situations with other playwrights and you have to figure out like how to play nice with each other. And I think that like that's been an element that I actually really love and that I've sorely missed over the last couple of months, is like I haven't been able to be in community. And so I think that like being able to be with everyone and to like have a group meal and like occasionally have Miyoko over and like, you know, just be like, oh, okay, like, you know, we are all coming at this thing from different angles, but we all have the same like general intent of like both like entertaining and also educating. And I think that like being able to be in community about that is like very exciting, and it's very affirming in a way that I think is like very necessary right now. I mean, to say now more than ever, but like also now more than ever. Like, why not? I said it. It's mine now.
I think, like, unfortunately for drama, like, I'm very inspired by these other writers. Like, unfortunately for the, like, posterity of us having, like, infighting, like, I'm just, like, so, like, inspired by everyone's work, and I also find everyone to be, like, lovely people, and so, you know, I wish there was more tension, and maybe I'm causing the tension, but I think,
Am I the villain?
No, I think
It could just be like your show, where like just publicly it's drama, but privately there's
publicly, I'd like to go on record and say, no, it's just been so lovely, I think, especially after this past year of, you know, being in community with some people, but like not having that sense of like, I feel like, at least from my vantage point, there's this sense of like we're all in it together, and I think that's really nice to be able to not only view each other's work, but like I can throw my whole weight behind any one of these plays. Like, they're incredible.
Miyoko, I would love to have you in this conversation as well. I know that you aren't in the house, but there was this incredible retreat that was online and like also had some in person. So I'm wondering, you know, being in community for you, how has that been? How's that, you know, influenced your writing process, if at all?
I mean, it's influenced it a lot in this just this whole process. But I mean, just to echo that, I am incredibly inspired by all of these wonderful playwrights and their work. And I think that will just always inspire me. And that this is kind of like the time where, in the writing process, where I start to feel like my work is being affected by a wider community, whether that be like you all or my artistic team especially too, like being able to just email people little snippets or drafts, you know, at any point, basically. That's when it really does become much more of a community project than just something I'm solely doing by myself.
So I've never had an experience like this. I've never been around like other writers like in the same space like writing. And I live by myself and I'm wired differently, so I didn't realize over the past, year and a half or whatever, I've become like really alien. So coming here, bless you all for your patience, because I was like, you gorgeous human people, love, 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 you know, just like sparking. And Miyoko did a reading, and I immediately said, I'm delivery bot. I am so delivery bot. I love you all, and all of these brilliant people, and all of their brilliant. It was actually good for me to be able to share space with all of you. Because if I had just met you through your words, I'd be like, oh my God, they're all the way up there. I will never, ever, ever be able to breathe the same level of stratosphere as these people, right?
But you see, we're like messy. That's what you're saying.
Oh wow, they're like real human beings. You know? I'm so sorry.
No, I know. I just had to say it.
And so much of the beauty and communications and everything have gone into the stone soup of this text that I only hope is worthy of, this is a first and extraordinary experience in my life. I'm just so grateful to each of you.
Yeah. Right back at you.
Yeah.
Your work is so beautiful. Yeah.
I think also writers, I feel like we're inherently observers, and so when you get a bunch of observers in the same room and it's only observers, there's some really incredible conversations that happen from people who just watch other people. I've just had incredible conversations with each person here about American theater, about life in general, and there's one thing to get in a room and be like, okay, so how has it been like being an artist in the pandemic? But it's also like being around like a dinner table after we just made like spaghetti together and being like, oh my God, like I can't believe we like made it through, like we're continuing to make it through. And like, there's something that has stopped us from leaving this, you know what I mean? And like, you know what I mean? Like being able to see other people who are still like holding up whatever they're holding up, right? And it's, even though it's hurting and it's tiring, like we still do it.
LaCroix is really heavy.
Yeah.
LaCroix is so
it's
heavy.
So heavy.
Yeah. Sponsored.
Well, that's all. Thank you all so much for this incredible conversation, and I'm so excited to see the rest of your work and also how it grows and how it changes over this next week. And thank you, everyone, you know, on the other side of the screen for tuning in. And please make sure to get your all-access passes, and there are many other, there's the virtual readings, there's also other ways to stay in community with our resident playwright night on Wednesday, as well as our play slam for the honorable mention playwrights and staff as well. So please stay tuned for that. And I'm just so grateful to be in space with you all, for real. It's been an incredible conversation, and all of your work is just so beautiful and inspiring. So thank you so much. All right, I guess we say...